They tried to execute the alien giantess. So I stood in front of her. The barrel was already aimed at her head when Corporal Danny Ortiz stepped in front of it. Nobody moved. Not the 12-man firing squad. Not the 3 generals standing behind the glass wall of the observation deck. Not the 400 soldiers packed into the execution yard of Firebase Kestrel, holding their breath because they had no idea what to do with a man who would do something this insane. The alien was chained to a metal frame bolted into the concrete. Each chain was as thick as Danny's thigh. It did not matter. They both knew she could have snapped them the first night if she wanted. She had not. That fact alone should have told the general something. It had told Danny everything. Her name, as close as human lips could manage, was Vareth. Oh, she stood 11 feet tall, even with her head bowed. Her skin was the color of old iron, ridged along the shoulders and forearms like natural armor. Her eyes were a pale gold that caught light the way water catches light, moving and alive. She had 4 fingers on each hand, and each finger ended in something between a claw and a blunt nail, currently folded inward because she had spent 3 weeks learning that keeping them folded made the soldiers less afraid of her. 3 weeks. She had spent 3 weeks learning how to make herself smaller so that humans would not flinch. And they were going to shoot her anyway. Ortiz. The voice came through the yard speaker. General Aldrich. 58 years old. 2 wars, a chest full of medals, and a voice that sounded like it had been carved out of a mountain. Step aside. Danny did not step aside. He was 24 years old. He had been stationed at Firebase Kestrel for 6 months as part of the Xenobiological Contact Support Unit, which was a long title for the job of sitting in a room with an alien and trying to figure out how to talk to each other. He had done exactly that. He had brought her water in a bucket she could actually hold. He had learned the low humming sound she made when something confused her and the sharper clicking sound she made when something amused her. He had sat on the floor of her holding room for 12 days straight until she stopped pressing herself against the far wall when he entered. He was a corporal. He had no authority to be standing here. He had no rank worth mentioning, no political connections, no leverage of any kind. He had a name tag, a uniform, just in the absolute certainty that what was about to happen was wrong. Last warning, Corporal. Danny turned his head just enough to see Vareth behind him. She was watching him. Not the guns, not the generals. Him. Her gold eyes were completely still, which he had come to understand meant she was paying the most intense attention she was capable of paying. He turned back to face the firing squad. "She has not done anything," he said. His voice carried through the yard because it was very quiet and he spoke clearly. "She came to this planet with no weapons. She made no aggressive contact. She allowed herself to be detained. She has cooperated with every protocol we have put in front of her. You cannot execute a being for existing in a way that scares you." One of the generals, not Aldrich, a younger one named Prescott, who leaned into the glass. She killed 4 soldiers. She killed 4 soldiers who entered her cell without authorization at 2 in the morning with weapons drawn. Danny's voice did not shake. He was surprised by that. "The report says self-defense. The report that your own investigation team filed." Silence. In the back of the yard, someone coughed. Aldrich's voice came through the speaker again, quieter this time, which was worse. "Son, this is not a courtroom. Move away from the target." "No, sir." He heard the chains shift behind him. Vareth moved. A long breath came from 400 soldiers at once, the sound of a crowd bracing. But she did not stand. She lowered herself, slowly, 1 knee at a time, until she was sitting on the concrete behind Danny. Then she placed both of her enormous hands flat on the ground, palms up, and fingers spread open. Every person in that yard understood what that meant. It was the posture she had shown them in week 2. The one Danny had written up in his report as a submission display, the Verath equivalent of raising both hands. She was not asking to be spared. She was telling them that she had never been a threat, that she had always known the difference between the soldiers who came in scared and the one who had come in curious. She was telling them she trusted him. General Aldrich was quiet for 11 seconds. Danny counted. Then he said, "Hold." The firing squad lowered their rifles. Not all the way, not with ease, but they lowered them. Aldrich's voice came through the speaker one more time, stripped of everything except exhaustion. "Get that man off my yard and into a debrief room. And someone get me the Xenobiological Ethics Board on a live channel. Now." Danny's legs started shaking the moment the tension broke. He had not noticed, during it, that his hands had been balled into fists so tight that his knuckles had gone white. He uncurled them, flexed his fingers, breathed. Behind him, Vareth made a sound he had not heard from her before. Low and slow, more vibration than noise, felt in the chest more than heard by the ears. He did not have a word for it yet in his report. He thought it might be gratitude. He thought it might also be something much older than that. He walked toward the gate, and the crowd parted, and nobody said a word to him, not in anger, not in support, not in anything. They just watched him pass. 12 riflemen, 400 soldiers, 3 generals behind their glass, on all of them watching a corporal with shaking hands walk away from the thing he had just done. He would be in that debrief room for 9 hours. What happened after that would change the course of 2 civilizations. But that part comes later. The debrief room was a rectangle of gray walls and 1 table and 2 chairs, and a light that buzzed faintly every 40 seconds, like it had somewhere else to be. Danny sat on one side of the table. On the other side sat Colonel Nora Vance, who ran the Xenobiological Ethics Board's field division, and who had apparently been flown in from orbit so fast that she was still holding a travel mug. She set it down, looked at him, said nothing for a long moment. "You know what you did could have ended with you in a cell." "Yes, ma'am." "And you did it anyway." "Yes, ma'am." She opened a folder, spread it on the table. His reports, all 12 of them. From the first day of contact to the most recent. They were thorough. They were detailed. They had photographs, behavioral charts, linguistic transcription attempts, hand-drawn diagrams of posture and gesture cataloged against emotional state. Vance picked up the diagram on top, studied it, put it down. "How long did it take her to stop being afraid of you?" "She was never afraid of me," Danny said. "She was cautious. Those are different things." Vance looked at him. "Afraid," he continued, "is what I was for the first 4 days. She clocked it immediately. I think that's why she stayed against the far wall. Not because she was frightened, because she was giving me space to get over it." Vance wrote something on a notepad. The incident at week 3. 4 soldiers, on unauthorized entry, 0200 hours. I wasn't there. I read the report. What would have happened if you had been there? Danny thought about it honestly. I think she would have looked to me first, to see how I responded. And if I had told them to leave, they would have left. And she would not have needed to do what she did. You believe that. I know that. She spent 3 weeks learning that folding her claws inward made us less tense. She knew exactly what she was doing around us. She would have checked with me. Vance closed the folder, laced her fingers together on the table. She had the look of someone doing math behind her eyes. Aldrich wants you charged with insubordination. Danny nodded. He had expected that. I'm overriding that. She held up a hand before he could speak. Not because what you did wasn't insubordinate. It absolutely was. But because the execution order was issued without completing the contact protocol, without a completed threat assessment, and without Ethics Board sign-off, all three of which are required under the Galactic Contact Act of 2041. The order itself was illegal. You standing in front of an illegal order is a different thing than you standing in front of a legal one. He let that sit for a moment. What happens to her? He asked. That, Vance said, depends on what you can tell me about her. So he told her. Everything. The water bucket, the 12 days on the floor, the clicking sound for amusement and the humming for confusion and the new sound from this morning that he still did not have a word for. The way she learned. How fast. Not the way an animal learns a trick, through repetition and reward. But the way a person learns a language. Through pattern recognition and context and something that looked almost like hunger. Like she wanted to understand not just the words, but the reason behind the words. He told her about the day Vareth had pointed at the window of her holding room and then pointed at the sky and made a sound Danny had written down phonetically as a low-falling tone that he believed, based on 3 days of cross-referencing with gesture and repeated context, meant something in the vicinity of the word home. Vance was very still when he said that. She was trying to tell you she has a home to get back to. I believe so. And you reported this. In Report 7, flagged Priority 1. Vance reached into the folder, pulled out Report 7, flipped to page 4, read the flagged section. Her jaw moved slightly, and the way jaws move when someone is controlling a strong reaction. This was sitting in Aldrich's inbox for 2 weeks, she said. I know. He issued the execution order 4 days after receiving it. Danny said nothing. There was nothing useful he could say to that. Vance stood, gathered her folder, picked up her travel mug, walked to the door, then stopped. Corporal Ortiz, what you did in that yard. That image is already on every military feed in this hemisphere. Soldiers on 6 bases watched a 24-year-old with no rank step in front of 12 rifles for a being that most of them have been told to classify as a hostile entity. She paused. Some of them are very angry at you. Some of them are going to think about what you did for the rest of their lives. She left, when Danny sat alone in the gray room and listened to the light buzz every 40 seconds. Somewhere in this building, Vareth was still chained to a frame, still patient, still waiting. He picked up his pen and started writing Report 13. At the top of the page he wrote, in plain letters, the only thing that seemed worth saying. She is not a threat. She is a person who is trying to go home. He underlined it twice. 3 floors above him, Nora Vance was already on a secure channel. Her voice was level and precise and entirely without hesitation. I need a direct line to the Varath First Contact vessel. Yes, that one. Yes, I know what time it is. Get me the line. Outside the fire base, the desert stretched flat and red and enormous to every horizon. Somewhere beyond that horizon, beyond the sky itself, something was waiting. Something 11 feet tall and made of old iron skin and gold eyes, except not this Vareth, the other ones. The ones who had sent her and who had not heard from her in 3 weeks. The ones who were, at this exact moment, deciding how long to wait before they stopped waiting. Nora Vance had 9 hours to make contact before that window closed. Danny Ortiz did not know this yet. He was still writing. The Varath vessel had been holding position at the edge of the solar system for 22 days. It did not move closer. It did not move away. It sat at exactly the distance where human long-range sensors could detect it, but could not get a clean enough read to calculate armament or crew count. That distance was deliberate. Danny understood that now, reading the intelligence briefings Vance had cleared him to access. The Varath were telling them exactly how much space they were willing to give. Not threatening. Demonstrating patience with a precision that should have been a very obvious message to anyone paying attention. Nobody had been paying attention. Colonel Vance's contact attempt went through at 0340 hours. Danny was not in the room. He was in a temporary bunk 3 corridors away, ordered to sleep by a medical officer who had taken one look at his blood pressure readings and used words like non-negotiable. He slept for 4 hours. Not well. He woke to a message on his communicator from Vance. It said, "They responded. Come to room 7. He was in room 7 in 6 minutes. The room was full of people he did not recognize. Linguists, signal officers. 2 people in civilian clothes who had the specific look of government people who did not want to be identified as government people. Vance stood at the head of a long table. She looked like she had not slept at all, but her eyes were sharp in the way eyes get when something important is happening. She looked at Danny when he entered. "Sit." He sat. On the main screen at the front of the room was a waveform, audio signal, already translated, or as translated as 3 weeks of contact work could manage. "They heard about this morning," Vance said. "We don't know how. Either they have sensors better than anything we've been briefed on, or Varath has a way of communicating that we haven't detected. Either way." She gestured at the screen. They sent a message. One of the signal officers pressed a key. The waveform played, and the sound that came through the speakers was layered, multiple tones at once, and then, beneath the tones, in heavily accented but completely clear English, 3 words. "Who is he?" The room was very quiet. "They're asking about you," Vance said, looking at Danny. One of the government civilians leaned forward. "This is significant. It means they've been watching this facility in detail. It means their monitoring capability is..." "It means," Danny said, "that she told them about me." Everyone looked at him. He kept his eyes on the waveform on the screen. That falling tone, the low one, the one he had not had a word for yet, in the yard this morning when he had walked away. He had a word for it now. She had been telling them about him. For 3 weeks. Whatever communication channel they had that he had not detected, she had been using it, and she had been describing him. And when the moment in the yard happened, they had already known his name. Not his rank, not his unit, his name. "What did you tell them?" one of the civilians asked him, as if he could answer that, as if anyone in this room could answer that. "What do you need me to say?" Danny asked Vance. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she pushed a microphone across the table. He picked it up. The signal officer made a small sound of protest and then went quiet when Vance looked at him. Danny thought about the 12 days on the floor of the holding room. The bucket of water, the clicking sound for amusement. He pressed the transmission key. "My name is Danny Ortiz. I'm a corporal. I don't run anything, and I can't make any decisions that matter. But she spent 3 weeks teaching me how to understand her, so I owe her." He stopped, started again. "I don't know if you can understand all of this, but she is safe right now. I'm going to make sure she gets back to you. I don't know how yet. I'm working on it." He released the key. The room was silent. 22 seconds passed. The response came back. Not audio this time. Text streaming across the screen in real time, processed through the partial translation engine. Rough fragments, but clear enough. "We know your name. She gave it to us. She said, 'There is one among them who sees. We have been waiting to speak to the one who sees.'" One of the civilians sat back in his chair. The linguist at the end of the table covered her mouth with one hand. Vance looked at the screen, and then looked at Danny with an expression that was not quite surprised because she had been in this field long enough to not be surprised, but was something adjacent to it. "You," she said quietly, "have just become the single most important non-commissioned officer in the history of human-alien contact." Danny looked at the words on the screen. "We have been waiting to speak to the one who sees." He thought about Vareth in her holding room. 11 feet tall, iron skin, gold eyes tracking him every time he entered, learning him the way he was learning her. Both of them, across every physical and biological and cultural difference that could exist between two beings, doing the same thing, trying to understand. "I need to talk to her," he said. "Before anything else. Before any negotiations. And any formal contact process, any of it. I need to go back to her holding room and talk to her." "That's not standard protocol," the signal officer said. "The protocol," Vance said, "has not been working." She looked at Danny. "You have 2 hours. After that, we have the Galactic Contact Council on a live call, and they will want you in this room." Danny was already standing. He walked out of room 7 and down 3 corridors and through 2 security checkpoints, and he did not run. But he walked the way a person walks when every second of delay has a cost. The door to Vareth's holding room opened. She was still chained to the frame, still sitting the way she had sat in the yard, knees bent, palms up, still waiting. Her gold eyes found him the moment the door opened. He sat down on the floor in front of her, the same way he always had. At her level, not looking up at her, looking across at her. She made the sound, the new one from the yard, low and slow and felt in the chest. He had the word for it now. He said, "I know. I'm going to get you home." She made the clicking sound, the one for amusement. And then she made a sound he had never heard before. 2 tones in sequence, falling then rising, and the translation in his earpiece, the partial one that Vance had authorized, gave him one rough word. Finally. Danny had 2 hours. He used all of them. He sat on that floor and he talked, and she listened, and she responded in ways he had spent 3 weeks learning to read. And by the time the 2 hours were up, he had filled 6 pages of a notepad with things that no translator program had caught, things that only 3 weeks of direct personal contact could surface. He knew, by the end, that Vareth was not a scout. She was not a soldier. She was the Varath equivalent of what the humans would call a contact specialist, sent deliberately to a location where a human settlement was expected to expand, with instructions to make herself findable before the expansion happened, so that the first encounter would be on terms that both sides could shape. She had been found 6 weeks earlier than expected, by a patrol that had not been briefed, by soldiers who responded to something large and unknown with weapons, because that was what soldiers did. She had not fought back, not because she could not, because fighting back would have meant the contact was already over. She had been waiting for the one who sees. She had found him on day 12, when a 24-year-old corporal sat down on a floor instead of standing in a doorway and stayed there until she understood that he was not afraid. He was just a person, and so was she. He walked back into room 7 6 minutes before the Galactic Contact Council came online. Vance looked at his notepad, then at him. "All of this?" "All of it." She handed it to the linguist. looked back at Danny. They're going to want a lead contact officer for the formal channel, someone who can maintain continuity across sessions. That's usually a colonel or above. It's usually whoever the other side has already decided to trust. She said it plainly. No flourish, just the fact of it. Danny looked at the screen. The council was joining one by one, faces from 6 different hemispheres, officials and diplomats and generals who had been briefed on first contact scenarios their entire careers and were now staring at a situation none of those briefings had imagined. A corporal, a set of hand-drawn diagrams, 6 pages of notepad, and a being 11 feet tall who had spent 3 weeks turning herself into someone a scared young soldier could understand. He thought about the word in his earpiece, the one falling tone then rising. Finally. "What do I say to them?" he asked Vance. She looked at the room full of very important people and then at him. "Tell them what you told the Verath ship. Tell them the truth and don't dress it up." He sat down in front of the microphone. The council lead spoke first. A woman named Director Paulson, silver-haired, precise. "Corporal Ortiz, we've reviewed the situation. We understand you have established direct rapport with the Verath contact agent." "Yes, ma'am. We are convening this council to determine the appropriate path forward. Can you give us your assessment of the Verath intention in your own words?" Danny looked at his notepad, at 6 pages of tones and gestures and things felt in the chest. He set the notepad down, looked at the screen. "They came here to meet us. They sent someone specifically trained to make herself approachable to beings who had never met anything like her. She let herself be chained and held for 3 weeks in a room because she understood that we needed time to get over our fear before we could actually see her." He stopped. "They have been planning this contact for a long time. They believe, based on what she observed and reported back, that we are worth talking to." Silence across the council feed. "That assessment is based on one soldier's behavior," someone said. A general, name tag out of frame. "It usually is," Danny said. Paulson looked at him for a long moment. "What do you recommend?" He had not expected that question. He was a corporal. Nobody asked corporals what they recommended in front of a 6-hemisphere council. He answered anyway. "Release Verath. Not as a diplomatic gesture, not as a strategic move. Release her because she came here in good faith, and we owe her that at minimum. Let me walk her to a transport and let her go home. After that, if the Verath want to talk to us, they will. And if they do, I'd suggest we let her decide who on our side is worth talking to." Another silence. Longer. Then Paulson said, "Aldrich." The general's voice came from off-screen. Tight, controlled. "Director? Release the Verath contact agent into Corporal Ortiz's custody for transfer to a diplomatic vessel." A pause that lasted long enough to mean something. "Yes, ma'am." Danny stood, picked up his notepad. He walked out of room 7 for the 2nd time that day, and this time he did not walk fast. He walked the way a person walks when they know exactly where they are going. 2 checkpoints, 3 corridors. The door opened. Verath looked at him. He held up the notepad and pointed at the door. Open. Then pointed outward. Then up, at the sky, at the direction she had pointed 3 weeks ago when she showed him the gesture he had written down as the word home. Her gold eyes caught the light. She made the sound. Low and slow, felt in the chest. He reached up, and with a key that Vance had quietly pressed into his hand without being asked, he began unlocking the first chain. It fell. Then the second. The third. She rose to her full 11 feet, and the room that had been built to hold her was suddenly very small, and he was very aware of the difference in their sizes, and he was not afraid. She looked down at him. He looked up at her. "Okay," he said. "Let's get you home." She made the clicking sound, the one he would spend the rest of his career trying to teach other humans to recognize, and failing. Because some things you can only learn by sitting on a floor for 12 days and deciding that understanding matters more than being comfortable. She walked through the door first. He walked beside her. Down 3 corridors and through 2 checkpoints and out through the main gate of Firebase Kestrel, into the flat, red desert and the enormous sky. 400 soldiers standing back on both sides. Not in formation, just watching. Because nobody had ordered them to watch, but they were watching anyway. Nobody cheered. Nobody spoke. They just watched a corporal and an 11-foot alien walk side by side toward a transport vessel on a landing pad at the edge of the base. Somewhere above the sky, a Verath ship adjusted its position for the first time in 22 days. Moving closer, not threatening, just closing the distance that no longer needed to be there. Danny did not know what came next. The negotiations, the treaties, or the years of work it would take to build something real between 2 civilizations that had started this whole thing with chains and a firing squad. He knew what came first: getting her home. That was enough for today. The transport lifted. The desert fell away below them. Vareth pressed one palm flat against the viewport and watched the planet get smaller, and Danny sat across from her and watched her face, and saw something in her gold eyes that he did not have a word for yet, but would eventually find one. It was the look of someone who had spent 3 weeks in a small room being patient beyond all reasonable expectation, who had bet everything on the possibility that one person out of 400 would choose to see her instead of fear her, and had been right. He started writing Report 14 on his notepad, and at the top he wrote, "First contact is not a moment, it is a choice. It happens the instant one person decides that understanding is worth more than being comfortable." He looked at Vareth. She was still watching the planet below, palm against the glass, gold eyes full of something enormous and quiet. Below them, Firebase Kestrel was a small square in a red desert. Above them, everything else.